you don't have to be any sort of like extremist in terms of your, crypto anarchist views or your libertarian views or your high risk tolerance for speculative investments or new technology. At this point now, it's like you got with Bitcoin for those reasons in like 2015, and now it's mainstream enough that you get with Bitcoin because it's aligned with everything else you believe. So, I thought it just made sense for it's like there's a movement happening and Bitcoin is a big part of it.
So we're here for the first ever live medium of exchange recording. I'm here with my good friend, Bill O'Connor, the founder of HODL hats. We're going to get into that. Bill is hardcore Bitcoiner, orange pilled to the fullest. I would say my good friend. And I'm really excited for this conversation, man, because we've had some really insightful talks over the last few months. Everything that you're doing with these hats, with the Bitcoin meditation site that we were talking about before this recording. And I'm just excited to learn more about how you've been building in both the Bitcoin space and advancing Bitcoin culture. So, Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
So, HODL hats, that's where I want to start. Can you just walk me through what brought you to create what I think are some of the coolest hats and Bitcoin merch out there right now, and just everything that's happened with HODL hats over the last few months?
Yeah, it's been a kind of, I don't know. The story has like chapters, I guess. So I started it in 2023. I was in between jobs and I'm a web developer professionally. So I was like, I'm getting into Bitcoin. I'm want to work on a little project. I'm growing out my hair and I need a hat to get me through the awkward phases. And I'm looking at the Bitcoin merch and I'm just like not loving all of it. And so, I discover the different tools to build a custom e-commerce site. And in particular, the tool where I can pick products, upload simple designs, never touch inventory. So I'm kind of like, hey, why would I not do this? It costs me nothing basically if I can get the website up. And I never really took that anywhere. It was just always like, yeah, it's just there. It's just my little project that I did. And then essentially I got to a point where I had designs in mind, that one in particular. And then the other one that's just like the classic HODL patch, where it was like, yeah, this Printful is the name of the platform that does the made to order stuff. It's just too much for Printful. Like they can't handle the detail of the stitching. They don't do patches. They don't have the hat that I want. So I kind of got to decide, like, do I want to actually like kind of send it? And because if I actually find an embroider and, get these real hats, then I have to buy them and stock inventory.
Yeah. Inventory and SKUs and all
yeah,
that.
Exactly. So now, I was like, you know what? These designs are worth it. I'm going to send it. Let's see if we can do something. And, that I kind of hung out there with like a few boxes in my house, and I'm trying to, start selling them at Austin Bitcoin Club and a little bit online. And then I, have this, this is like I don't know, almost like stereotypical, like hilarious kind of founder story thing. But, after we were talking about, you were talking about a 72-hour fast you were doing, and I was like, man, I got to do one of these soon. And I think it was President's Day, maybe one of those 3-day weekends in February. My wife had friends coming over that they were just going to have, girls' weekend. And I was like, the week arrived and I was like, oh man, I don't even have any plans. What am I going to do? I think I'm just going to go out to Marfa by myself to West Texas and fast. and like basically just, you know, go out to the desert and just like be alone and like,
A vision
you know,
quest.
pretty much, yeah, a vision quest. And I had some like life things that I like wanted to sort out. And one of them was like kind of how much, where do I want to be directing my attention outside of work? And yeah, like while I was on, one of the goals for the trip was like, I want to spend a lot of time like in meditation and stuff like that. And I kept getting distracted by like new ideas for hats that I was like, these are the best ideas I've had. I'm like, you know, forget the meditation. I gotta like tap into whatever's happening right now.
That is meditation.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
That's
just like,
amazing.
I'm just gonna like keep just like,
That's flow state, right?
yeah, exactly. Just let this
Especially
stream
especially when
keep
you're
flowing.
how many hours into a fast at that point?
Yeah, like 40.
Yeah. Like burger versus brainstorm. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the balance, and yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, so what is, or what are some of the designs that came out of that? Because for those who don't know, like HODL hats, this is the no second best design. It's my favorite. There is no second best in my opinion, but they're all great.
Yep.
In terms of designs, that one, make money hard again.
Yep.
I'm sure it's potentially triggering for some folks walking down the street. But even what's the eat beef and the Fed?
Yeah, eat meat and the Fed
too.
Yep.
But sorry to cut you off, but what were some of those designs that came across from that vision quest or that fast?
Yeah.
And this was in February timeframe, you said?
Yep.
Okay, so and now we're nearing the end of June.
Yep.
So almost 4 months ago.
So I'll say many of them are in the backlog and will hopefully come out soon. I kind of, you know, I'm at a point right now where I'm like, I wanted one thing that I wanted when I was like, all right, I'm taking this serious, I'm sending it, is like, I want there to be a selection of hats. So it's not like I have that one hat, because like just stylistically speaking, and I even had someone say it one time when I was selling hats here, was like, they were like, which one's the least popular? Because I want to buy a hat that everyone else isn't wearing. And it has just proven to be true that like there are a couple standouts that have like sold out a batch, but mostly people, it's like kind of evenly distributed, a lot of hats selling a little bit. So it kind of like validated the idea that like, yeah, there needs to be kind of like a handful of styles and messages represented. But I took the steady stream of ideas and put them in the backlog and took it as a sign, like, I'm just inspired about this. And so like in terms of like what I'm trying to do with my attention outside of work, like this is a good place to direct my attention, because this is something that clearly, like when I kind of shut stuff off and like get out, it's like this is like kind of moving in me.
Yeah. And I mean that's amazing, because I can already see where most of Bitcoin draw into that, and I definitely want to dive deeper into that. And I think one of the first conversations I remember having with you, of when you were selling the hats at an Austin Bitcoin Club event, I don't even know how many months ago at this point, was I was talking to you about how like Bitcoin and culture feel like they're really integrating. Like being a Bitcoiner is a verb, and it's not just, yes, it is, you know, a money that you save in, but it's also kind of an ethos and a mindset that has really started to permeate through society. And you alluded to it, where a lot of the merchandise that was on the market felt almost cartoony. Like it was very meme focused, which I think was really good for the time, of, you know, like the shirt that just was big block letters HODL, or like,
Yep.
or I'm trying to think, you know, ask me about Bitcoin, like these shirts that were very much just billboards
Yeah.
for Bitcoin.
Totally.
Whereas these hats and your style, what stuck out to me was like it was a little bit more subtle. And I think that's kind of, as we get into the maturation phase of Bitcoin, where, you know, it's not just HODL and number go up. It's also how you act every day and how you present yourself in a much more low time preference horizon. And that's kind of what you were saying about putting those designs in the backlog. I kind of see what you're getting at there. Just the undertones of that Bitcoin ethos. So I guess to kind of take that step back is like, how did you get into Bitcoin? What what was like something that stuck out to you in terms of, whether it was the white paper or whatever it may have been, that started you on this journey of now, selling these hats and
Yeah.
running around the conference in Vegas where people are literally like chasing you down trying to purchase them.
Yeah. It's honestly kind of, I mean, there's no shame, but it has kind of been shamefully slow and gradual at first. So it started for me in 2017. I had a friend from high school who's basically just like kind of an early adopter personality. And I had graduated from college in 2015, and some of this was a group of friends from high school that they were 1 and 2 years older, and we had all kind of converged in Dallas. And one of them was like, "Hey, did you guys hear about Bitcoin in college?" And we're kind of like, yeah, I don't really know what it is. And he's like, well, it's a big deal, but there's a new one that's even better called Ethereum. And it's like this massive opportunity. And basically I was like, you know what? I'm game. I'm like interested in, just this idea of kind of like decentralized money. And basically, like, I don't even remember what site it was. I think it was Kraken, but which is obviously very legit. At the time, I get on there and I'm like, never heard of this site. UX is, it's a baby. And they're asking for pictures of my driver's license and my social security number. I'm like, dude, hell no. And, at the time, I think I wasn't even looking at the prices then because I didn't know about it, but I'm pretty sure like ETH was, whatever, $80. And the next year, 2018, I'm like, all right, I've sat out for too long. I'm seeing this is happening. And so I'm, buying Bitcoin and ETH, and not plugged in at all. I'm not on Twitter. So I'm basically just getting all my information in this group. And then I think when I started, so like I said, I'm a developer. So I was kind of like, after a couple years, I was like, I should start looking into what that means in these spaces. And so I start learning more about Bitcoin and Ethereum and how they work, and picked up the Bitcoin standard in 2020, which I did not know at the time that Bitcoin maximalism was even a thing. And get to the end of the book, and he's like doing the last chapter is like FAQs or something, and asking about other blockchains and other uses of the blockchain. And he's like, there is no other economically valid use of the blockchain. And I'm like, wait a second, that means no Ethereum. What's going on here? And just kind of like follow that trail. And like right after that, I think all this like Austin Bitcoin stuff kind of kicked up in 2021. And I was lucky to have basically one of my best friends in Austin, his one of his old fraternity brothers, who lives here as well, was like deep into Bitcoin and Bitcoin maximalism. And so my friend Enrique was like, David is inviting us to this party, and this block party. And so we went, and that was kind of, I was like, dude, this is freaking sweet. This is just awesome. Like all these people talking about Bitcoin. And that's when I get plugged in there. Everybody kind of, just the vibe helps me eschew my shitcoinery. And at that point, I'm still kind of just like, Bitcoin is like, an awesome investment. And then I read Eric Yakes's The Seventh Property, and just like I read it basically all on a plane. And the chapters about the history of central banking, it was just so scandalous to me. I was like, holy cow, I'm getting freaking radicalized. Next book I read was Alex Gladstein's. And then I was like, dude, I'm not doing this right. Like this is so important, and I need to get involved. And that's when, I was like, I'm a developer. I should be working in Bitcoin. So I ended up getting a job in Bitcoin. And basically from then it's just like turbo. I was basically like, before taking that job, learning about Bitcoin, before I realized just how important it was, it kind of felt like it was a hobby. And so it was like, how much time do I justify allocating to Bitcoin just because I think it's cool and interesting and kind of important? And then when I'm like, oh no, this is super important, I'm getting a job in Bitcoin. And now that I have a job in Bitcoin, I'm kind of like, it's my career. So I'm like kind of justified. Like I spend all my time, I'm just reading Bitcoin books all the time.
Yeah.
Is your business accepting a form of payment that stores value over time? A recent survey showed the number one challenge that small business owners are facing today is inflation. You raise prices, renegotiate with vendors, try to stay ahead, but your dollars keep losing purchasing power. At the Bitcoin Payments Advisor, we help business owners like you accept Bitcoin, a form of money that's built to resist inflation. Unlike dollars, Bitcoin has a fixed supply. And that means the value that you receive today has the potential to hold or grow over time, not quietly erode. Our service makes it simple. No servers and tech headaches, just easy setup, white glove support, integration with your existing systems. If you're ready to explore a smarter way to get paid, one that helps you fight inflation instead of fall behind, visit bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com. Again, that's bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com.
No, I mean, that's the rabbit hole sucks you in, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's such a trope, but it's also so true because of how many different avenues you can go down, from the philosophy side, from the economic side, from just the history side of like what's actually going on. And I think it's always unique when talking to somebody who has that developer like skill set, because I don't. But you're a front end developer, so
Right.
so you create or design or build the aspects of the tools that like I interact with.
Right.
So that's why I like talking to front end devs. Back end devs, I just get lost in the conversation, and I'm like, oh, so like, I try to find my nerd snipes where I don't sound too stupid. But like, I really like talking to front end web designers, because at least like I feel that I can contribute to the conversation. And one of the things that you mentioned around, even going on Kraken back in 2016 or 2017, whenever that was, of that UI experience and just how much better Bitcoin UI has gotten.
Totally.
Like design in general, from the tools online to the physical tools that we have, like these hats. Not to show the hats again, but like we're going to come back to the hats because they're great. So I guess it's just my question really is like, as a dev, what do you take into approach from knowing all of the important pieces of Bitcoin, right? Like all of the special principles and qualities that it has between, it's not like we call them wallets, but it's really an address,
Mhm.
right? Like it's these weird obfuscations that we have to balance with the user. So from an adoption perspective, how do you view that, of making it so somebody doesn't feel like they're getting scammed when starting to enter their own journey down the rabbit hole, but then also not losing some of the core principles that you were alluding to and that we allude to on this show?
Yeah. I recognized that my journey was so slow and gradual, and that it proved to be the case consistently, as it does in so many people's journeys, that the more I learn, the more passionate I get. It's like such a freaking like indicator of you're getting to some truth. You know what I mean? It's like every time you learn a little bit more, you just, oh my God, this is so much more important than I thought it was. And so once I got my job, once I started working at Swan, I basically was like, okay, well, now I work in Bitcoin. And before that, I was kind of like, I'm not trying to tell people that I trust and that trust me. I'm not trying to tell people what to do with their money, even though like I have my strong opinions. But, writing out the post FTX crash was just like so grueling. I'm like, I cannot, I don't want to be on the hook. For telling somebody. And then once I start working in Bitcoin, I'm like, I mean, yeah, I'm talking about it with everybody. We're talking about it now. Like before I was kind of like, oh yeah, it's just my little thing. And now it's like, no, we're talking about it because it's like obviously what I'm doing. And so that led to, you know, a lot of conversations with people who were kind of like, I don't know, varying levels of interest in Bitcoin. And the people that were initially super receptive, that it was a lot of people, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I hadn't given that a good look. You're working in it. What's going on? You know, I don't want to say like I convinced them to buy Bitcoin, but basically like when I told them about it, they're like, yeah, okay, I want some. And knowing how long and gradual my journey had been, I'm like, yeah, we got to get you some, but we're like not done here. Like we
It's just getting them
just
off
like,
zero.
yeah,
it's
exactly.
getting them off zero.
And
That's the hardest part.
Totally. I took responsibility at that point for like, I brought them to Bitcoin. I need to kind of like shepherd these people. And so I started a newsletter that I like basically, I don't really pump. I just like send it to 30 people that I know every week. And it's just all I'm doing is sharing highlights from Bitcoin Twitter and like commenting. And I use that as my way to kind of like steer the person's kind of like Bitcoin exposure toward the important principles and like what's actually happening, because I don't know if there's a single source of Bitcoin news that I would trust to just give it to you straight, no hype, no, like just like education plus news plus not trying to get you like to buy something.
Yeah, there's a ton of noise out there and it's hard to know who to trust. I will say I got to give a shout out to Op Daily and the daily newsletter that Bitcoin Park puts out. Shout out Rob, because that for me has been like, it's just 4 bytes every day.
Nice.
Pure signal. And, you know, it's Bitcoin and freedom tech related, but there's not really opinions that are, or editorials that are embedded into it. It's just 4 of the biggest stories. But that is the biggest issue, I think. But between just the sheer volume of everything that's being produced on the internet, and then also like when you factor in AI on that and how much easier it is to produce content.
Yeah. I don't even know, honestly, now. I feel like maybe I got unplugged from something, or maybe it's changed. But at that time, that was in like fall of 2023, I was pretty concerned with like if you just Googled Bitcoin, or you want to learn anything about Bitcoin and Google's your starting point, you're just going to get blasted with like moon boys basically talking about why the price is going to a gazillion and why you should also get XRP and like.
Right. And that's, I think, where over the last 4 years, we'll call it, the success of Bitcoin maximalism has been a clear delineation of Bitcoin and crypto, or Bitcoin, not crypto. And I think that's been super helpful for the Bitcoin industry, because it's starting to move the conversation away from just number go up, which number go up is great. And I understand why it's such a strong marketing play, because it so plays on somebody's emotion of like that adrenaline you get when you see, you know, you're up 20-25% in a few weeks. You're like, this is incredible, I'm getting rich. Like you you start thinking of all the things that you're going to purchase and your mind runs crazy. What is it? The reality is when you think over a long enough period, you're like, okay, you might have some days of choppy movements, some days of volatility, but then you'll have a lot of days of just kind of flat. And like, it's interesting seeing where we are in the cycle right now, because some people will argue that we're actually not in a bull market, even though we hit all-time high, like, what was it, a week ago? So that's been a really just interesting change in like perspective, and how I've changed in of how I like orange pill and try to get people to adopt Bitcoin. Because are you going to get rich from it overnight? No, I don't think so, unless you like do some leverage play that I would not recommend.
Yeah, you're also, I think, kind of inviting them to shitcoinery if you try to sell them on that.
You're 100%, versus it being a better savings technology where it preserves your wealth over time and your time and energy. because then you can start to like think longer term. You can start to brainstorm or build out, future plans for a business or a side hustle that you're working on, and like have the confidence that you'll be able to bring it forward down the road whenever that time comes. And this kind of transitions to what we were talking about right before the show, because we need more Bitcoin podcasts. We need more Bitcoiners. We need to onboard the next, million, 100 million, ultimately 8 billion people into Bitcoin. And how do we do that? And the ongoing meme on Bitcoin Twitter right now of we need more Bitcoin podcasts. Everybody should have a Bitcoin podcast. I think there's a key missing word there. I think we need more good Bitcoin podcasts. But I just want to hear your perspective on what is the best approach to onboard people, to get them familiar with Bitcoin, and to really just like get somebody to say, okay, yeah, I'm ready to start learning more, and ultimately then let Bitcoin do the work, because Bitcoin sucks people into it.
Yeah. Usually at this point, when I'm talking to someone about Bitcoin, it's just so different than it was a few years ago. Because a few years ago, it was like kind of like my friend, right? You heard about Bitcoin in college, right? Like, oh yeah, you heard about when Bitcoin did that crazy, bull run or whatever. But like, it was kind of like for a while, you could be introducing somebody to Bitcoin, and now everybody's got an opinion on it, and obviously more or less well informed. Usually, when I'm talking about Bitcoin now with people who aren't Bitcoiners, it's mostly like you were talking about we've got this culture vibe shift happening, and Bitcoin's I wouldn't even say it's aligned with the culture. It's honestly feels like it is the strongest maintainer of the principles that are kind of like, it feels like making a comeback. And I just like, I feel like my job is to help people see that Bitcoin is aligned with the stuff that the principles that they already try to maintain. Whether it's, and this was something that we keep talking about, Bitcoin is Venice, like that book just like, I don't know, it's just so clearly elucidated for me. It's like all the good stuff, good principles in business, agriculture, just like any, personal virtues and principles around resiliency and sustainability and honesty and all these things. It's like, yeah, you want that in your money, and you just point out a couple simple things about how like basically corrupt and abominable fiat is. And like, my experience has been that people get with that. And it feels like in Austin, I definitely recognize that there's a lot of casual Bitcoin maximalism. Like, a lot of people in Austin know Bitcoin, not shit coins, even though they're not just like, I'm all Bitcoin all the time. It's like, starting to become a thing that people are recognizing that Bitcoin is what's aligned with a worldview that appreciates, all those things I just said.
Medium of Exchange is sponsored by Polaris Payments. Let's face it, for now, businesses still need to accept fiat and credit cards. Polaris Payments helps with all your credit card processing needs using a consultative approach. Think of Polaris like a performance coach, helping take your business to the next level when it comes to accepting all forms of money. For more information about Polaris Payments, visit polarispayments.com. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's, to your point, when everybody already has an opinion on it, it's just, you need to find the connective tissue of what that person values and how Bitcoin can help them. And like, one of the things that I think is so just, it's so cool to follow as like this global movement just continues to increase and grow, of different use cases, people finding Bitcoin to fit into like their interest or their, business or service or good or whatever it may be. And you hear them explain it, something that I have zero familiarity with, like homesteading, for example, as we've talked about. where then they start talking about, self-sufficiency and like decentralization and all these things. And you're like, oh, these are a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
And that's super niche, right? But then you start going up to some of the higher, like more mainstream type of businesses that are coming out. I mean, even not like not to shit on all of the current happenings in Bitcoin, like the treasury companies, they're doing the logical thing.
Totally.
They're doing the logical thing of oh, I have a business where I take debt and I buy something that increases in value. That's good fiat business.
Yeah.
Is it sustainable over the long term? Like, I mean, I guess we'll wait and see. I have my thoughts, but like, there's just so many intersections to the point where you just start to see the world through a lens of orange.
Yeah.
For better or worse, and you can't unsee it. So it's just, I guess I don't even really have a question there, but just to riff off that, like that's where I see the world of like, okay, everything gets consumed by Bitcoin and Bitcoin consumes everything. And then here we are just living in, I guess, Venice, right? Bitcoin is Venice, which is a book that I do need to read. I think there's a copy back there. There's one across the hall. So I'll have to get my hands into it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all of that is kind of why I wanted to create HODL Hat, is basically like, you don't have to be any sort of like extremist in terms of your, crypto anarchist views or your libertarian views or your high risk tolerance for speculative investments or new technology. At this point now, it's like you got with Bitcoin for those reasons in like 2015, and now it's mainstream enough that you get with Bitcoin because it's aligned with everything else you believe. And so, I thought it just made sense for it's like there's a movement happening and Bitcoin is a big part of it. And so the merch doesn't need to be as kind of like Bitcoin feely. You know what I mean? It's like can kind of have a more natural aesthetic, I guess. And I just was like, I want people to, I don't expect that like I wear a Bitcoin hat, a HODL hat, and some stranger on the street is like, Bitcoin, dude, I was wondering about Bitcoin. Tell me about it. But, I'm wearing my HODL hat. My friends are wearing our HODL hats. Other friends are like, all right, what's going on here? You know what I mean? And you start a lot of conversations with people that you kind of already have some rapport with very
100%.
easily.
And I mean, I think I told you about my tic-tac-toe adventures around Austin, right? And I've worn this hat a few times around my tic-tac-toe. For those who don't know, I also have a newsletter that I'm trying to onboard normies to get introduced to Bitcoin, called the Bridge Report. And I was thinking of what's something that's super approachable to get a conversation started. And I was basically walking around the city of Austin for, I guess now 3 months or almost 4 months, playing people in tic-tac-toe, just a blank whiteboard. And after the game, I would, I'd ask them questions, and then I would ask them to subscribe to my newsletter. And they would always say, oh, what's your newsletter about? Bitcoin and Bitcoin adoption. Now, every time I was wearing this hat, they would like look at the hat and be like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like that's a Bitcoin hat, which I loved, because it's one of those things where when you see it, you don't necessarily know right away. It's subtle, that I mentioned before. But I think what's cool about the design pieces, and shout out to Skylar from Finite Supply, who's been parading this too, with just beautiful design work and digital graphics. Of Bitcoin deserves beautiful design, because Bitcoin itself is beautiful design from a technical level, and Bitcoin has attracted some of the most beautiful people in terms of like diversity of thought and just willingness to go out and like make it happen and take this magic internet money into a now north of $2 trillion asset that's eating away at the global financial system.
Yes.
So like it just makes sense, but that means that you have to put in the time and the effort to actually like create something beautiful, because you can just take a paintbrush and start throwing it at a blank canvas, and there's been a lot of commentary that that's fiat paintings, right?
Yeah,
like those things that sell for millions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, like my 4-year-old cousin could have could have painted that. So that's what's cool about like, you know, being able to just pause and think about it through not just a lens of how can this benefit me 24, 48 hours in the future, but how can this benefit me 2 to 4 years in the future, or 10 years in the future? How can this benefit my kids? And, you know, as somebody who doesn't have a family of my own and doesn't have kids yet, it's changed the way that I view on what that future will look like for me versus, you know, when I was super young, but like before I knew what Bitcoin was, right? Like I didn't think about any of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to go back real quick. You were talking about, you know, all the intention and the intentional people in Bitcoin. And that was one of the things that I kind of like when I was in the desert and like, no, dude, I just got to go harder on HODL hat is like recognizing that it already, obviously, you know, I don't think most of us spend enough time marveling at the statistical improbability of our like existence as humans on this planet. And then beyond that, you know, so many layers before you get to, and we're alive and young and energetic for Bitcoin. And if like Bitcoin's going to do to the course of humanity what we all think it's going to do, that's the coolest thing ever. Like there's not a time that I would want to be alive for more than for this. And so it's like, I'm not trying to wear a Dallas Mavericks hat, dude. I like the Mavericks, but I'm freaking pumped about Bitcoin, dude. I'm trying to wear a Bitcoin hat. This is awesome. And all the people in Bitcoin, like, just have met so many amazing people in Bitcoin. It's like, dude, Team Bitcoin is freaking legit. Like, if there's a team I'm trying to rep on my hat, it's Team Bitcoin.
Couldn't agree more. I love that because like on one hand, you're like, okay, it's kind of weird that, you know, this money has a culture, but then when you actually start to study the themes around the money, like forget the money for a second, because if Bitcoin didn't exist and there was something else that just brought people to, you know, instead of Austin Bitcoin Club, if it was Austin Beef Club, right? Like if it was people who are just like super passionate about like intelligent food and, you know, eating healthier or whatever, then you would get a similar crowd, right? But it just happens to be Bitcoin, which has this crazy history and it's much newer. And like, I love the meme of, you know, we weren't born in time to explore the new world. And we probably won't be able to explore, you know, new galaxies and universes in our lifetimes, but we are able to explore Bitcoin. And like, that is the next frontier of this just, you know, 50 to 75 year financial fiat system that has been so integrated into everything.
Yeah.
That like, it's exciting. Because solving problems is fun. It's hard. It's not easy, but it's fun, especially when you start to see like, you know, adoption numbers go up. And the other thing that, you know, I want to make sure that I touch on is you're mentioning the Bitcoin community because we still are relatively small, right? So just how supportive Bitcoiners are of like that idea that a rising tide lifts all boats is really encouraging for somebody getting started like you or even myself.
Yep.
Because it's a high quality of people. And when you're committed and dedicated and willing to put in the work, then it feels like the sky's the limit.
Totally. And also just from a kind of like business perspective, I guess, it's obviously for me, like HODL hat's just a little side gig. You know, selling something to Bitcoiners is, like you said, it's a relatively small group. But it feels really good to sell something to people that they appreciate and like you just like respect what they're about. You know what I mean? And then, you know, you get all the positive feedback, like people reaching out and being like, dude, I freaking love this hat. And, you know, getting to use it as a tool to meet more Bitcoiners, like we were talking about in Vegas, just like running around with my backpack and like, you know, sometimes just getting mobbed by people seeing
I actually saw in Vegas in the expo hall, you were just like walking in whatever direction, and I saw somebody like come out of nowhere, just running, being like, "HODL hat, like hot hats, like I want a hat." I was like, that is awesome. Like that is because that is just like so grassroots, and it's been not it's been a 2-year journey, like you said, or over 2 years now, where you're iterating and I'm sure you're learning a ton of running a e-commerce website that's now you have all this inventory and you're coming to ABCs and selling them just like out of basically the trunk of your car.
Yeah.
like all these things. So just what are some of the kind of, to take it away from Bitcoin for a second and just go and put on like your founder business hat, what are some of the things that you've learned about operating a e-commerce business that you maybe surprised you, or that Bitcoin has helped like get you through the some of the pain points?
Yeah. Do you know who Stephen Pressfield is?
Yeah, of course. War of Art.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit is the title of one of his other books.
Okay.
And that is a concept that like basically I feel like I've had to learn it a few times, and I only can learn it by like trying to sell my shit. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, at first I'm like, oh my God, dude, I had this idea for a hat. This is going to freaking blow up. And like blowing up looks like, I sold 25 of the Eat Meat and the Fed hats over the course of a month, which was awesome. And no other hat has done numbers anywhere close to that. You know what I mean? So it's like pretty small time. And eventually, like, why I was thinking about this in the desert is because it was kind of like, I'm not gonna like learn some vital business lessons making an optimistic case like a few $1,000 selling hats in a year. And I'm that's not big bucks. So I'm not making big bucks. I'm not like learning a lot. So why am I doing this? And basically it was like, you know what? I am doing this because it's like almost like, if I'm being super pessimistic, it's like I would do this for charity, because I think it's important to get those conversations started and give Bitcoin some visibility and like kind of like contribute basically to the cultural movement that we're talking about. But it's ultimately proven to be the case kind of that like I love this because I love, like, it's so grassroots, like you said, like I meet everyone I sell to and they're Bitcoiners and we love Bitcoin together. You know what I mean? So it's like awesome meeting people who love Bitcoin, who think the hats are cool. It's like, okay, so we've got like something kind of like fundamental, foundational, really in common. And so it's great to connect. But I would say, I guess what I've learned, well, I don't even want to say too much what I've learned, because I honestly feel like sometimes I haven't quite tried hard enough to learn anything for certain, because I'm kind of like keeping it on the side, right? So I've certainly learned that it's difficult to like sell to a small audience, and to find people online and stuff, and find people. Bitcoiners aren't trying to spend a lot of money either. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just been kind of like hard. It's like been way easier, as you would imagine, in person, because I can kind of connect with the person beforehand. And then it's like, people just like buying from someone that they have a connection with. But yeah, I guess, it's just been a little slow online. Like that's kind of something that I'm trying to continually kind of like figure out, especially like this dynamic that I've realized is I'm trying to do this on Twitter and Primal, because that's where Bitcoiners are. You got to go to where your people are to sell to them. However, people don't get on Twitter to shop. You know what I mean? People are on Instagram and TikTok shopping, but the Bitcoiners aren't on Instagram and TikTok. So like, it's kind of just like a tough, I guess, rock in a hard place kind of deal.
I mean, that's super interesting, but also I love, to your point, like the in-person connection and like, basically buying from a friend.
Exactly.
Like, it becomes not just oh yeah, that's a dope hat, I want it, but also I want to support my friend. And I think that's where Bitcoiners are a tough customer, because to your point, we don't want to separate from our sats, and but we're willing to separate from our sats for high quality goods.
Mhm.
So it's like the ultimate feedback loop. So it's really hard to get in
Totally.
that flywheel. But then it's like, okay, I'm gonna ride or die for HODL hats. Because,
That's what has proven to be the case. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, my customers are enthusiastic, which is just freaking fun.
I mean, there was a tweet that I saw last week of someone who has a pretty big following on Bitcoin Twitter wearing that. I believe it was the Make Money Hard Again hat. And I just saw like 1,000, it wasn't 1,000, but it felt like 1,000 replies of, where do I get this hat? Where do I get this hat?
Yep.
So like, I mean, that's where it starts. And like 25 of one type of hat in a month is no joke. That's almost a hat a day.
For sure. No,
and
that,
and
yeah.
And what I continue to remind myself, because of all of the like business and entrepreneur content that I've consumed over the last, year and a half, is that growth will not be linear.
Yeah.
And you just need to remind yourself. And that's where the low time preference gets really hard.
Yep.
Being a Bitcoiner, because you're like, okay, I have my Bitcoin that I want to hold for the rest of my life and pass down to future generations, right? But then I also need to like pay my bills. And the only way to pay my bills is by having sats or cash flow.
Right.
So it's like, so you have this weird like opportunity cost and everything of like, of what exactly you can push and not push. So,
and that actually was kind of like points to part of why I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to do this. I'm going to spend the money, stock the inventory, get the better designs, all that stuff, because, there's this kind of like Jordan Peterson idea that's basically like, how he's all about kind of like, you find meaning through responsibility. And like in one of his books, he's got this chapter that is basically saying like, if you see some problem in the world or in your life, really, like bring it local, you see some problem in your family or in your company or whatever, the problem is persisting. It's either because other people don't have time to solve the problem, or they don't recognize it as a problem. So if you see that as a problem and no one else is going to solve it, that's your problem. Like you're the chosen one basically for that problem. And
you can replace problem there with opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is where I got with HODL hat. Was I was like, I mean, no one's making the hat I want. And I understand basically like this is tough to sell to. So like no one's going to say, ooh, dude, business opportunity, selling better hats to Bitcoiners. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, they're not going to do that because it's like, it's tough. And so, I've got my income from my job. I've got the web development skills to maintain the website, so I don't have to pay someone to do that. And I've got, enough skill with some of the graphic design tools that I can make my designs, and like, for lack of a better phrase, like feeling like, well, this is my problem. So
Nice.
I got to do it.
Well, and I mean, there really aren't that many other Bitcoin apparel companies right now, right? Like, I think the other company that comes to mind, and they're not an apparel company at all, is Strike. Like, they do good merch, but they do like, limited edition drops and things like that. And it is by no means their core business.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like they're signaling that they're going to.
Same deal, right? It's like,
store.
It's not my primary business either, because it doesn't work as a primary business yet.
Yeah. But at the same time, thinking along the lines of like better quality goods, I mean, this is like a quality hat. Like if I gifted this hat to somebody who is not a Bitcoiner, then, maybe they won't wear the Make Money Hard Again hat because they might disagree with that design.
Yeah, there's a lot to have issues with on this
political spectrum. But this one, I mean, this is harmless, or the HODL hat, or I love the one with the what is it, with the bull and like kind of the laser eyes and the patch, like so that's where you start to kind of Trojan horse your way into non-Bitcoin world.
Yeah.
Of like, no, this is a quality hat and it's a cool hat. It's it aligns with all the trends of hats that people are wearing now. And it's very funny that, like, you know, we're going deep into the design of hats, but like hats are, I mean, my shelf right now, I have so many goddamn hats.
I mean, it was something that I basically realized, like I said, I've grown my hair out a few times, and I just knew, like, yeah, during that phase from like whatever, 8 months to 16 months after my last haircut, gotta have a hat on like all the time because my hair just looks stupid. Wasn't really like a huge hat guy, but I definitely was just picking up. It's like, dude, that's like a big part of like men's fashion now. It's like hats. Like people get it not like dressed up, but like trying to be stylish to go out on the town or whatever. They're wearing a hat usually.
All right, I'm going to ask you a super specific question. How deep or what can you teach me about just like hat design? Like not like necessarily the graphic design, but like the actual like bill and, you know, like the snapback versus what's the other one? The adjustable.
Yeah, dude, honestly, I just basically go on vibes. Like I kind of think of the design and just like am just kind of in my head thinking about the types of hats that I've seen people wearing, like whether or not it's the trucker hat with the plastic mesh or the nylon, or like a more kind of like baseball cap type of fit with the different colored bill, and just like thinking about how some of the, you know, design ideas for the front, what kind of hat they might look good on.
Because the corduroy hats too, those are pretty unique. Those are unique. Those, I feel like you see those few and far between, and it always feels like somebody who's that's more like hipster vibe. Where they're probably gonna, you know, I don't wear that style because I don't think I could pull it off. But when I see somebody who's repping it, I'm like, okay, like I kind of I get the vibe that this guy's doing.
Your favorite barista wears a corduroy hat for sure.
No, that's great stuff, because yeah, every hat, like it feels like you have a different use case for it, right? Like you depending on, you know, if you're going to the beach versus if you're going on a run versus if you're going to work. Versus if you're just like waking up and you don't want to fix your hair. So yeah, that's hat talk. But no, it's great. It's great because like so many people, to say again, just they use it. It is a utility, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like I get value of, because when I bought this hat, I paid you in Bitcoin, and I get value from the sats that I paid in this hat.
Yeah, you mentioned all those different use cases for hats, which is like so true. And like, I don't know, wouldn't have thought of it before, but it's like, yeah, I got my hat that I wear when I do lawn work, and I got my hat that I wear when I'm working out, and I got my hat that I'm wearing when I'm lounging, whatever. And if I actually wanted a hat for all these use cases, this is why I basically was like, dude, I got to start this. Cause like, what hat? I'm not going to go out. I'm not trying to shop for a hat and just like pick some random hat that I think looks cool. I don't know. It's just like not my style. Like, I'm not going to get a random hat, not going to get my sports team hat. Like, I don't know. Bitcoin's the thing that I like want to talk about and like care to promote.
Oh, it's a great signal. It's a great signal to represent that type of brand, because people, like you said, they wear their sports teams religiously. Probably the most commonly worn hats in the country are Red Sox, Yankees, or Dodgers hat.
Yeah.
If I had to guess.
Yeah.
So, well, soon it'll be this one. But so I do want to kind of switch gears a little bit, because that was, you know, hat talk. That was great. I learned or I discovered rather, a website that you created. I had no idea that you created this earlier today. Meditations of a Bitcoiner. It was one of the coolest sites that I've seen. Just like a wealth of resources that were, you know, intertwined in a way that I haven't gotten introduced to online. So just tell me about Meditations of a Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about, first off, the name, where it came from, and then kind of what you were, what the intention of the site is.
Yeah. So when I first joined Swan and I was like starting to go deeper on Bitcoin, I had a quick realization just from listening to people like Tomer talk about Bitcoin and share videos and stuff. And it's like, dude, this is like a really spiritual thing. Like it's, going past like, yeah, it's not just an investment. It's not just, Alex Gladstein, like humanitarian pro-social tool. It's like very spiritually impactful to people who interact with it. And I was thinking like, man, there's got to be some kind of like, well, I guess to jump ahead, the name Meditations of a Bitcoiner kind of was like inspired meditations like Marcus Aurelius, like just kind of like short little bits of wisdom. And so I was like, man, I bet there's some kind of like spiritual wisdom revolving around Bitcoin book to be written, but I don't know what it is. This was the idea that I had at the time when I first started, is like, I know that's there. I just don't understand Bitcoin well enough yet. But I'm going to just like stuff that idea for a little bit. And then, fast forward maybe like 9 months, and I had read a bunch more books, been working in the industry for a few months, met a lot of people. But again, mainly it was like, I almost feel like everything I think about Bitcoin is in Bitcoin is Venice. And, when I first read that and I started talking about it, I kept coming up against people being like, dude, I couldn't understand it. It's just like too dense. And it is very dense. Not in the sense of like dry, but in the sense of like every word and every sentence is like really doing a lot of lifting. And so it's like just a lot there. That it's just like, I don't know, I guess some people had a hard time with it. And I'm like, but that is just so fundamental for me for understanding Bitcoin's importance in the world. And I'm like, I need people to get this. And I had thought about like, oh, should I write like a blog series that's like basically, how I'm just like the ideas from Bitcoin is Venice that resonate with me. Because I know like these are the things that are going to kind of like bridge the chasm, the things that are like, you could go to a normie and be like, hey, do you care about this, this, and this? And then be like, absolutely. It's like, okay, well, that's all Bitcoin. Like that's so much of Bitcoin is Venice was like pointing to that for me, of like so many of the kind of like obvious problems with unobvious causes in the world that everybody can agree with. It's like, lays out clearly, well, that's how that came from fiat kind of thing. That's just like, there's all kinds of stuff, not just pointing to fiat in Bitcoin is Venice. But anyways, I was like, should I write or something? Blah, blah, blah. And then I just like randomly one night was like, oh, what about that idea I had like for the meditations thing? And I couldn't sleep. So I was like, I'm just going to write down what some of those ideas would be. And like, wake up in the morning with a note with like 50 different ideas. And I'm like, oh, dude, I know how to do this now. Like, I know what the ideas are. And basically decided like, well, that's the kind of the medium where I can express these ideas about how Bitcoin ought to resonate spiritually, even with people who aren't into Bitcoin. It's just like, so profound beyond knowledge of economics or interest in investing. And so at first I started writing, and I'm like, I would say I'm not a great writer. I'm a decent writer when it comes to very clearly expressing an idea. Poetry, not my thing as much. And so I was like, I'm going to write it, and then I'm going to give it to ChatGPT, see if it can like kind of fluff it up. Make a custom GPT that's like told to be kind of like write like, the psalmist or Lao Tzu and Tao Te Ching. And like basically it's just some of these kind of traditional spiritual poems. And it was so good at it that I pretty quickly was just like, oh, whoa, I got that backwards. You write, I edit. To ChatGPT. And so then it basically was like, I've got, a massive backlog of ideas where I'm just like, I'm typing in, 200 words describing like some random thing about how like one of my favorite ideas from the book was this idea of toxic bigness and how fiat fuels toxic bigness in all these different ways all across, you know, society, whether it's government, businesses, academia. All these things are like big in a way that could never be sustained on a sound money standard, and in a way that has truly negative consequences locally. And so I'm like, yeah, everyone can get with that. So, you know, I tell ChatGPT basically everything I understand about toxic bigness, and then I'm like, all right, go write the verse. And it writes the verse, and then I take the verse and give it to a different GPT that I've told basically a style of art to try to mimic, and it'll give me an image that kind of represents that meditation.
That is sweet, because the site is really cool. And what I like about it too is like you can base it. It's like there's a randomness or a random button, and it just generates like a different, you know, poem or little aphorism of just something that it does have a very philosophical lens to it, which is cool. And I had a hunch that it was kind of a nod to Marcus Aurelius, but I didn't want to assume. But that's sweet, because I read it. I forget the name of the title. It was like Satoshi's Gamble or something. I read that one earlier, and I was like,
so yeah, Satoshi's Wager.
Satoshi's Wager. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. It's a problem that is worth the gamble.
Yeah, that was basically like, you know, I just have moments where I come across something, even if I've seen it before, right? Like this was inspired off of Pascal's Wager, which is basically this idea that like, well, if God exists and if he's going to send you to hell if you don't believe in him, then then you want to believe in him. If he doesn't exist and you believe in him, well, you're going to hell or whatever anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so you might as well believe.
At least you're a good person.
Right.
Know? At least you're living, you know, the quote unquote right way.
Right. So yeah, it's like you might as well. So then I was just like, yeah, dude, same deal with Bitcoin. You're suffering from fiat no matter what. So you might as well get with the solution.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I didn't, and the art on the site too, I didn't realize that was AI generated also. That's dope. So how often do you update that? Because I'm gonna start getting that site into like my, you know, kind of natural routine.
Nice, dude.
I recommend all the listeners do too, because it's just like one of my favorite things to do, is basically like I'll just take either the Almanac of Naval or the Bed of Procrustes by Nassim Taleb and just open a random page.
Yeah.
And just read their, you know, kind of wisdom. And what you're kind of getting at is like kind of that version for Bitcoin.
Totally.
And I think we're so early that book will probably be written 50 times before like the best or quote unquote finished version is.
Right.
Just because of all of the lessons and things that are going to change with this massive transformation of, you know, living on a sound money financial system.
Yeah. That project kind of honestly goes hand in hand with HODL Hat for me, because they're both just like inspired by the notion that like people already get with this. They just don't know that it's Bitcoin that they get with. And I want to help people see that. And I feel like a lot of like I'm a big fan of Tao Te Ching, but any sort of spiritual writing like that, to me, I would characterize it by its purpose, maybe not its intended purpose, but the outcome, I guess, being that it kind of like points to something. It helps you see something, but it doesn't like explain something in explicit detail. And so much of Bitcoin books is like, well, yeah, you got to explain because you're writing to somebody who doesn't know how this new thing works. But it's like, but there's so much of an opportunity with introducing people to Bitcoin of just like helping them see something that they can totally already see.
And that's the balance that we have as like Bitcoiners of like, you don't want to overwhelm somebody.
Yeah.
Like when I have a friend who asks me to, you know, help them get set up with a wallet, I usually like will write out like a full paragraph of what they need to do, and then I erase all of it, and I'm like, just download River. Just download
Yeah.
Strike. Like if you have any questions, like hit me up. I'll talk your ear off. But it's literally, you know, like one of those memes where someone's like, "How was your weekend?" and they go into all of the shit that you don't actually want to or need to share.
Yeah.
And then they just delete it all, and it's like, weekend was good.
Yeah.
Bitcoin good.
Yep.
Like it's tough because of that balance of you want to make sure that people get onboarded the right way, to your point of like not going down a route of shit coins. That's why I always recommend like a Bitcoin only exchange. But
and even if you let people kind of like lead, they don't know what they want. You know what I mean? Like someone is like, all right, dude, I want to know how Bitcoin works. It's like, you don't want to know how Bitcoin works. You really don't. Not yet.
Yeah, I mean, well, because then they always say, well, what about mining?
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, like that's like
you just don't need to know about that right now.
Yeah, like, that's level 5. Like,
yeah,
I still don't even know about mining, and I've been following Bitcoin for so long. Like, I know some things, but I can refer you to a guy.
Yep. Yeah, it seemed like honestly, one thing that really appealed to me about Eric Yakes' The Seventh Property book was that it does do a little bit of both. It's like, here's kind of the case for Bitcoin and here's how Bitcoin works. Whereas it feels like most books kind of are like doing more or less one or the other.
Sure.
And the here's why you should care about Bitcoin books, I just haven't found one that I would be super enthusiastic about giving to someone who's lukewarm interested. Mm-hmm. Like if someone's interested, there's great books.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. I really like Parker Lewis's Gradually and Suddenly.
Yeah, I've been rereading that.
But it's just like, it's for someone who's just like, all right, fine, what's the deal with Bitcoin? It's not like, here's this book. It's like, they're like, I don't read. You know what I mean? Or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot of information.
That's also why we need more Bitcoin podcasts, because
yeah,
the other side of my love for that meme is when you go through the game theory of Bitcoin consuming everything, then everything is a Bitcoin podcast.
Yeah.
So we might as well just help accelerate it.
Yeah.
that's like the other, that's why that meme is so good. But no, I totally agree. Like if somebody says to me like, dude, how do I want to deep dive into this thing. Like, what do I do? Like, yeah, I'll send them, a copy of the Bitcoin Standard. I'll send them Gradually Then Suddenly. Like, I'll send them Price of Tomorrow, and I'll send them all the podcasts of those guys and all of the great work that they've done. But now it's like now there's a big kind of idea in marketing of like what's in it for me. So if I'm trying to orange pill or sell somebody on Bitcoin, for lack of a better term, then it's like, no, this is how this helps you. This is how, like, this is, yes, there is the savings piece of it, but this will also create efficiencies, reduce your reliance on, XYZ central authority.
So that I think points to kind of almost like what I'm not doing with my projects is like, there's, helping someone see why this is practical for them. And then there's also like, I'm just trying to like help someone basically get inspired. You know what I mean? It's like that there's something amazing going on here and you should try to be a part of it. Or that like, everybody's got a lot of the same issues with the world and expecting the wrong solutions, look in the wrong direction, and look how clean this solution is, and look how world changing this movement is, and all this stuff that's like kind of, we try to get them with both, right? Like this can help you with that problem, and like this is really something. Like this is not just you should buy NVIDIA.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably a symptom of fiat is complexity, right? So people want to think of the most complex way to solve their problem, when realistically the simplest way to solve your problem is probably go for a walk, get good sleep, buy Bitcoin, and don't eat crap.
Yeah,
like that'll solve a lot of your problems just right there. And that's hard to do sometimes, but it's also on the surface really easy to do. And
it is interesting to think about, like, it must be hard to do because people aren't doing it.
Well, there's so many distractions. I think,
Yeah.
I think what's hard is the focus, right? Like
Yep.
I was having a conversation with a friend in Nashville a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the 8 Sleep mattress. And I watch a lot of podcasts, not all Bitcoin podcasts. So my favorite podcast right now is Chris Williamson and Modern Wisdom, and he's a sponsor. He's 8 Sleep is a sponsor of his. So I like hear the ad read, so like I know all of the like kind of information about 8 Sleep, and all the benefits, and you should be investing in your sleep, and you spend literally a third of your life there at least, right? So there's mountains of evidence. But one of my favorite memes that I saw, this was kind of in response to the podcaster bros all pushing the 8 Sleep and all of these optimization tools like Brian Johnson and those guys. Is like, you have a bell curve. You have the left side of the bell curve of go to bed when you're tired, wake up when you wake up. You have the middle, like 65 or 85%, whatever it is, of literally what I just described, like, thousands of dollars on a mattress, like subscription to your freaking mattress. You're literally paying $20 a month to
that's
your
insane.
sleep. Like, you're going to bed, or you're starting your bedtime routine by putting on glasses, and then you start your tea, and then you turn off your screen, all these things, to the point where you're like, if you're behind by 20 minutes, you're stressed.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the middle, like angry meme. And then you have the guy on the right side, the like wizard, genius of, I go to bed when I'm tired and I wake up when I wake up.
Yeah.
And that just gets at that simplicity, right? And that meme exists in the Bitcoin world of left side, stack, stay humble, stack sats, middle. Oh, I'm high leveraged on MSTR, and I'm doing this and this and this and that. And then the right side, stay humble, stack sats.
Yep.
And it's so interesting because, to your point, it is easy, but it's not, because for whatever reason, we have this like innate yearn to make it harder than it has to be. When, maybe one of the ways to see that it is that simple is just like starve yourself for a few days, go into the desert. Because like during my 3-day fast, right? Like on hour probably like 60, I did a breathwork session in my apartment, and dude, it was a near psychedelic experience, and I just like had this sense of clarity of, having the stamina to get through whatever the challenge in front of me was. Now, in that particular instance, it was making it through the next 12 hours of that fast. But then all of the other challenges that I've done this year, both physically, mentally, and spiritually, it's just like, oh, just the only way out is through, right? And like, that's such a simple saying, but it's the truth. And I mean, we've kind of derailed. I don't even know if this is gonna stay, if this is to stay in the pod. Like, now we're just riffing, right? But like, it goes back to the just to bring it back to Bitcoin, of like this idea of proof of work. Like, it's just proving that you solved another block, 10 minutes, another block, and at the end of the day, like, that's it. It's just blocks and a distributed ledger of transactions in, transactions out, like to this address and that one, public private key. Like, that's kind of it. And it's hard to grasp that simplicity, and that's why it's so like mind bending for people.
Yep.
Did that make any sense of what I just said?
Totally. I've got a verse on meditations about like Bitcoin as like a psychedelic thing. It's just like, dude, that's just like, I don't know. I think about every time I've had mushrooms since getting into Bitcoin now, I always think about Bitcoin. I'm like, dude, this is just the craziest thing ever. And that actually kind of was like, I think in 2022, like when I barely even knew anything about Bitcoin, it was kind of similar to the meditations thing where I like had this idea of like, yeah, this book needs to exist. This is an idea that's legit, but I just don't know the deal. I had the same thing on a mushroom trip in 2022 where I was like, dude, Bitcoin's like maybe the craziest thing ever. I don't really know how, because I don't understand Bitcoin well enough yet, but I think it might be the coolest thing ever.
So that's actually when I first discovered Bitcoin back in, I think it was in 2017, like the fall, I think. Speaking about mattresses, that's how I conflated Bitcoin. Not that Bitcoin was a mattress. No. So, like I said, I listened to a lot of podcasts. At the time, every podcast was advertising with like Casper mattresses.
Yeah.
And it was direct to consumer. Like, we cut out the middleman. Like, we can sell it to you cheaper or at a better price. Like, this is more valuable because we're getting it straight from our manufacturer, right? And when I learned about Bitcoin, I basically conflated Bitcoin as direct to consumer money, right? So I was like, oh, you don't need the bank. The bank is what's issuing the dollars. Now, obviously, it's the Fed, but at this point, whatever. And I was like, wait, so Bitcoin just cuts out the middleman. That makes it better, right? Because like everything at that time was like, oh, direct to consumer. It's more. We can make it better.
Yep.
We can give you better value that way. And that was my like initial like, you know, dose of the orange pill of like, wait, this thing actually kind of makes sense. And that was before I went down deep the rabbit hole of actually understanding this thing that I was buying.
Yeah.
I was just buying
Same.
it. At that point, I was just buying it as something that I was, you know, kind of like using as a savings / investment vehicle.
Yeah.
And then COVID helped accelerate I know that money printing is bad and inflation is bad. And when you print money, that leads to inflation. Ipso facto, super bad.
Yep.
So I'm going to buy more Bitcoin. But I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to start reading the books. So like I literally bought, you know, Andreas's textbook, Mastering Bitcoin, and like learned about this stuff. Now, do I understand it still from a technical level? Absolutely not. But can I explain what the difficulty adjustment is? Yes. And that helps me from a personal perspective, understanding it at a foundational lens. But then I need to remember that that took me, you know, 3 to 4 years before.
Yeah.
Before I even cared. So like if I'm
exactly,
like,
yeah.
if I'm talking to somebody who's just like, why should I buy Bitcoin? Like I need to.
The answer is not in mastering Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. Just hand them a textbook. That'll convert.
Right. Yeah. That was kind of like the idea with meditations, right? It's like, there's a piece of education that's not like answering someone's question. It's making them want to ask more questions, because unless they're sufficiently interested, they're just not going to get very far. When they ask you about Bitcoin, they don't understand how deep it goes, and they don't understand that it took so long for you to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going to need some inspiration if they're going to do this themselves. They're going to go very far.
Oh yeah, man. Well, I mean, this has been awesome. This has been a ton of fun. So just to like wrap, what's kind of next for you? What can we keep a lookout for? And obviously tell us where we can get some great hats.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm selling the hats at HODLhat.com. I'm using my personal Twitter for all of my engagements there. So that's just Bill__O'Connor.
The double underscore.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Some other Bill O'Connor took my preferred. I ought to go find him. But yeah, and then I've got Meditations of a Bitcoiner. And there's a Substack newsletter there too that I'll just send out a verse. Shoot for every week. And some links. There's a concept on the website of a verse of the day that just auto updates. So I'll send out, you know, the verses of the day for that week. And then if anybody's interested, I don't think, you know, Bitcoiners aren't my target audience for my newsletter, casualbitcoiner.com. But if you know somebody who, like, you know, similar situation to what I was describing, is like, hey, I told this person about Bitcoin and they need a steady drip. Got that going. What I've got coming soon. One of the hats that I've been really excited about that I think Fix the Money, Fix the World is one of the most important and potent messages.
Love it.
And deserves a good hat. deserves good design and deserves a design that I don't think I could do. So I've actually got a friend that I met at the Cheat Code conference in the UK last year who's an illustrator. He's worked on a design for me.
That's
and I'm
awesome.
kind of like, you know,
Little collab.
yeah, exactly. A
There
little
you go.
collab. So hoping to put that out soon.
Model
And
hat streetwear coming soon.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
so
possibilities are endless.
couldn't say it better myself. Dude, this has been great. Thank you so
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
much. 100%.